Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to have a special guest with us today. We have artist Andrea Dezsö, whose new exhibition from the Muddy Banks of the Chattahoochee will be opening at the Columbus Museum on Saturday, August 8th. It's being installed right now. So we're just thrilled to have her here with us today. We're going to talk a little bit about the upcoming exhibition, and then she's going to read some stories to us from a Brothers Grimm fairy tale book that she illustrated a few years ago. So hi, Andrea. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Lucy. Thank you for having me. This is really exciting.
Yeah, we are thrilled to have you here. A quick reminder, if you're watching us on Facebook, that if you'd like to ask us any questions, you can add them to the chat box, and we will do our best to keep an eye on it and answer them as we go. So Andrea, before we get started reading the book, I wanted to show a couple images from your upcoming show. And I was hoping that you could chat with us a little bit about your inspiration. Go. Okay.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, to tell people a little bit about what they're looking at, Andrea makes these beautiful tunnel books, and they are layers of cut paper. Andrea, please jump in if you can, if you have a better description. Layers of cut paper, and you can peek through them, and so you can see when you look at this image that there's a foreground and there's some depth to it, and these are the different layers of paper as it goes back. Oh, there we go.
I think now it's better. Is it good?
Yes, okay. I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So this tunnel book is called Adam and Eve Sasquatch. And I created the tunnel books for the show for the Columbus Museum from the Murky Banks of the Chattahoochee because I was really interested in the local myths and lore of local just unexplained phenomenon and characters that might be lurking in the river that people have been telling their children or to each other for a long time around where Columbus is situated. It's a beautiful river, the Chattahoochee, and it's very rich in folklore and in stories about tie snakes and the Watchers and various beings that, this is the Watchers, various beings that live alongside people and at times interact with them. And I'm generally really interested in tales and stories and fairy tales and folk tales and myths and imaginary or imagined beings. And so this seemed to me, for a site-specific installation, a very rich treasure trove of such spaces and such beings. And so tunnel books really, I believe, lend themselves to representing these kinds of spaces where strange and wonderful beings live or lurk that might in some way interact with humans. And alongside these beings and these spaces are also stories, some of them with ways that you can safely interact with them. So a number of these stories are actually about beings that are not necessarily menacing if you know how to speak to them and how to be respectful for them. And many, I believe, have been around for longer than people have been around. So in a way, we might be in their space. And so it also reminds me of these admonitions or teachings of how to treat nature with respect and the environment with wonder and respect and curiosity. and to allow ourselves to notice strange and beautiful things that we encounter in nature, and to always go into these spaces with a sense of respect and awe and curiosity. So those are the ideas around which I wanted to create this show. And in regard to the Brothers Grimm, it's a similar idea that these stories have been not written by the Brothers Grimm, but they were collected. And they collected them from the people in Germany, in Europe, during the time when the brothers lived. People didn't have television and didn't have movies, and so they would tell stories to each other to entertain each other. And sometimes these stories were told to children, but sometimes they were told to adults. And people then would discuss them, and they would like change them slightly. When in the retelling, they would tell their friends, and it would look slightly different than the way they heard it. And so the stories transformed and changed, and everybody added to them. And there are stories in this book. There are many stories. It's a really wonderful volume, very thick. So if you like fairy tales, this is a really good place to start. It's a classic. And the reading that I selected for today is about beings that, just the same way as the Thai snake and the Watchers and the Sasquatch that I was working with for the museum show, these stories, these fairy tales also feature beings that some people might say are imaginary beings, but some people back when these stories were first made up really believed that these stories exist, that these beings existed. And so one that I want to start with is...
Before you start, excuse me, before you start reading, would you hold up the cover of the book again so everybody can see it?
Yes.
So this book was translated by Jack Zipes, and Andrea was the illustrator for it. So you can see, looking at the cover of the book, the similarities to some of the photographs that we looked at her artwork.
Yes, there are these black and white paper cut like illustrations. And thank you. The special thing about this book is that it's translated, Jack Zipes translated it based on the very first German edition. So it's not been censored and sanitized in any way. The subsequent German editions have always been a little bit transformed and edited, but this one is the original, the way they were actually collected. And so that's what I love about it, is because they have not been altered, they actually retain the diversity of voices and styles of the stories. So they were not unified stylistically, in like if one writer would have written all the stories, they would all be in that writer's style, but they all retain the respective fairy tale tellers or makers note or style. Is it okay if I start?
Yes, wonderful. Please start. Thank you.
So this one, the first one, I have a couple, depending on how long it takes to read. I can read 2 or 3. They're very short. And this first one is called The Elves. The Elves consists of 3 stories. The first story is about a shoemaker for whom they did the work. A shoemaker had become so poor that he didn't have enough leather left for a single pair of shoes. In the evening, he cut out the shoes that he planned to work on the next morning. However, when he got up the next day and was about to sit down to do his work, he saw the 2 shoes already finished and beautifully made, standing on the table. Soon, a customer paid so well that the shoemaker could purchase enough leather for 2 pairs of shoes, which he cut out that evening. The next morning, when he once again wanted to sit down and work, they were already finished, just as the pair had been the other day. Now he was able to purchase enough leather for 4 pairs of shoes from the money he received from the 2 pairs. And so it went. Whatever he cut out in the evening was finished by morning, and soon he was a well-to-do man again. Now, one evening, right before Christmas, after he had cut out many shoes and wanted to go to bed, he said to his wife, "We should stay up one time and see who does our work in the night." So they lit a candle, hid themselves in the corner of the room behind the cloths that had been hung up there, and watched closely. At midnight, two cute little naked men came and sat down at the workbench, took all the cut-out pieces of the shoes, and worked so swiftly and nimbly that the shoemaker could not take his eyes off of them. Indeed, they were incredibly fast, and he was amazed. They didn't stop until they had finished the work on all the shoes. Then they scampered away, and it wasn't even day yet. Now the shoemaker's wife said to him, "The little men have made us rich, so we ought to show them we are grateful. I feel so sorry for them running around without any clothes and freezing. I want to sew shirts, coats, jackets, and trousers for them, and you should make a pair of shoes for each one of them." The shoemaker agreed, and when everything was finished, they set all the things out in the evening. They wanted to see what the little men would do and hid themselves again. Then the little ones appeared as usual at midnight. When they saw the clothes lying there, they seemed to be quite pleased. They put the clothes on extremely quickly, and when they were finished, they began to hop, jump, and dance. Finally, they danced right out the door and never returned. The end. I really love this because it's an unusual event that happened to this shoemaker, and they did the right thing. They wanted to say thanks in the right way, and that kind of seems to have set things in balance. So I have one more. It's even shorter than the first one. Is it okay?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
I love hearing these stories.
This one is about a servant girl who acted as godmother. A poor maiden was industrious and neat and swept the dirt from the door of a large house every day. One morning, she found a letter lying in front of the door, and since she couldn't read, she brought it to her employers. The letter was an invitation to the maiden from the elves, who asked her to be godmother to one of their children. The maiden thought about this for a while, but after her employers convinced her she shouldn't refuse the invitation, she said yes. Soon after, 3 elves came and led her to a hollow mountain. Everything was small there and also incredibly dainty and splendid. The mother was lying on a black ebony bed with pearl knobs. The covers were embroidered with gold. The cradle was ivory. The bathtub was made of gold. The maiden performed her duties as a godmother and then wanted to depart right after doing this. But the elves asked her to remain with them for another 3 days. She spent those days with great joy, and when they were over and she wanted to return home, they filled her pockets full of gold and led her back out of the mountain. And when she came to her home, she realized that it wasn't 3 days she had been gone, but 1 whole year. The end.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing those with us, Andrea.
You're very welcome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So I have a quick question for you before we go. So thinking about the Brothers Grimm tales that you've illustrated, and also what you shared about your inspiration for your show here at the Columbus Museum, would you tell us what got you interested in folklore tales like these?
Well, I grew up in Transylvania, in Romania, and when I was growing up, folk tales were a very big part of our lives. So they were still very alive, both folk tales and also art, folk art. So people embroidered and they created wood carvings, and they decorated their homes and their farms with things that they made. And so I was really always very interested in how things looked, and how things looked in very particular ways in different villages, depending on the tradition in those villages. And so it was this whole world around us that was infused with stories and with art, and it was all made by people who today we wouldn't think of as professional artists, but just regular people. And that was just so inspiring, that you could go to anybody's home, or you could go just walk down the street and look at the houses and their fences and their gates, and how ordinary things like spoons and I don't know, just cutting boards were made and thought about and decorated in particular ways, and how people actually made those things with their own hands, or they knew who made them. So it wasn't like when I lived in a city, and so in the city you bought things in a store, you didn't quite make things the same way. And for me that was fascinating, that you can live in a world where everybody is a maker, and everybody feels prepared to tell a story, or to sing a song, or to participate in creating and giving forth a culture the way they received it from their parents and grandparents. And that was just always really inspiring for me, and it still is.
I love the connection between your childhood in Romania and then your experience here living in the US, and the way that you used the opportunity of this show to learn more about the folktales and traditions of Columbus. I love that connection. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're watching, please come and see Andrea's amazing exhibition. It'll be opening this Saturday, August 8th. The pictures that we showed you really can't do justice to the work itself. So please come and see us, and check our website for our new operating hours and safety procedures. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.